Welcome to the Stereoactive Movie Club. My name is Jeremiah, and I'm here with Alicia, Laura, Mia, and Steven. And we're going to be talking about the 1980 film Raging Bull, directed by Martin Scorsese. But before we go on, let's hear from everyone about one movie they've watched recently that they want to talk about here. Steven, what did you watch?
I saw Wakanda Forever, the Black Panther sequel, on Friday of last week, and it was really great. It was definitely a lot sadder and more dealing with grief than I expected, and I actually felt a little sad watching it just because Chadwick Boseman had passed away, and they incorporated a lot of his death actually in it as a character and as a person. So it was really well done. There was a lot of good action sequences, and they also had a character named Namor that they kind of brought in a lot of Mayan culture into it, and he was different than he was in the comic book. But I really did enjoy it, but I was definitely like a lot more moved than I expected out of a Marvel movie.
So I have two quick questions for you. Is
Mhm.
it pronounced Namor? Because I've
I
never heard it
think
said
so.
out loud in all my years of reading comic books. Is it Namor, Namor?
Well, this version is Namor, and they give a reason why he's pronounced that way
Okay.
because it's Mayan culture. I think
Mm,
it means something different than it would have in the comic books.
gotcha.
So.
And did you like the recent Marvel movies since Endgame?
It's kind of interesting because they don't seem to connect in the same way with me, and I don't know if it's just because I've seen all of them at this point, and so it's harder to connect with the newer ones
Hmm.
because I can't really see them culminating into anything at this point. But I do enjoy them, and at this point, it's sort of I'm so familiar with you know all the characters and like what they're doing, so it's sort of like another movie for me to enjoy.
Yeah, I think they've all been a little lame since Endgame. So I was curious if you liked this one when this is. I've seen mixed reviews for it, but knowing that you like this, but had the same opinion about the other movies as I did, I'm curious now to
Hmm.
see it. Um,
Yeah, it's good. Watch it.
all right, Alicia.
Yeah, I saw See How They Run, which was like a sort of an Agatha Christie homage that was released earlier this year. It's on HBO Max now with Sam Rockwell and Saoirse Ronan and a bunch of other like British actors. Adrian Brody's in it too.
Hmm.
It was all right. It wasn't as good as I was hoping it would be. I was kind of mystified by why they chose to cast Sam Rockwell. I mean, he was good and everything, like he was fine, and I like Sam Rockwell, but like I 100% sure there was like a British actor that could have played that part
Mhm.
and done the accent correctly and everything. And actually, there's an actor who named Mike Wozniak who this character basically looks exactly like him. So I don't know why they didn't just hire Mike Wozniak to play this part. But anyway, that was my, issue. It was a little, I don't know. I felt like they kind of Americanized it a little too much, but oh well.
Just call it payback for all the British people who play Americans all the time and win Oscars and stuff,
I
though.
know.
So,
I know.
Laura, how about you?
I watched The King of Comedy.
Nice.
I thought I'd seen it when I was a kid, and I definitely saw images of it, like scenes, but I never watched the whole movie. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I love that movie. Great. And Mia, have you watched anything?
I haven't watched anything.
Yeah.
So, Jeremiah and I have been moving several states, so I'm behind on my movies. But I really want to watch Don't Worry, Darling, which is now on HBO. I don't know if anyone else has seen that yet, but I've been following all the like gossip around it. Um, and I was like, kind of wanted to see it in theaters, but the reviews were so meh. But now that it's on HBO, I'm definitely going to watch it. So hopefully next week I will have a report on that.
And I did actually get a chance to go see Black Adam after a long day of dealing with our move, and it was okay. Um,
Mhm.
it it could have been better. I thought The Rock was a little lifeless through most of the movie. He spends a lot of the movie just like in this one pose, just floating around. And it's kind of bizarre. Like he's this supposed action hero, but he's like seems to barely move in the movie a lot of the time, except for special effects moving him around the screen. But it was still kind of cool to see characters that I grew up reading in DC Comics because I'm a DC boy it was nice seeing those characters on the big screen. I never thought I would see them. It wasn't quite the same as seeing Black Manta on the screen and Aquaman and being like, I can't believe they fucking did this. But still, it was fun.
Yeah. I liked it too. I think we talked about that in the last podcast.
Yeah, you mentioned that you'd seen it on a previous episode.
Yeah.
So, for those who may not have listened to the show before, this is a podcast where the five of us are discussing movies that have appeared on Sight and Sound Magazine's poll of the greatest movies ever made that comes out every 10 years. The next poll will be out sometime this year. In fact, I think it might even be out by the time people hear this episode. It's very likely and probable. So we're basically trying to watch some of those movies from past polls before the new one is out and also after, probably at this point. So, and again, this time we are talking about Raging Bull. But before we get into the history and background of the movie, what did each of us know about it going into this viewing? Who had seen it before? If not, what were you expecting, if anything? And Lora, since you picked this one, can you start us off and also remind us why you chose it?
I saw it when I was a kid, and I knew it was a very intense, gripping film. It's also been sort of a running joke for this podcast in that it's come up a bunch of times. It's also the last, like 1980, the oldest film that on the list.
The newest film on the list.
What'd you say?
The newest film on the list.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And also I wanted to see how it aged for me, how it held up. So I just want to experience that again.
Gotcha. And Steven, how about you?
I'd seen this movie in my mid-20s. I just had rented it. I really remember liking it a lot. I remembered more the actual fight scenes than I did actually the plot of the movie and, sort of how the characters kind of interacted with each other. And since then, it's been kind of an interesting rewatch just because I've seen a lot of like the Godfather movies and the Sopranos to kind of compare it in the acting to what I had seen when I was a lot younger and wasn't familiar with that genre of movies.
Okay. And Alicia?
Yeah, I had tried to watch this once before and only got about maybe 20 minutes into it or so and just couldn't deal with it. Was not enjoying it at all and stopped watching it. So that was my experience with it.
When did you say that was? I missed that if you did say.
Oh, that was probably, I don't know, sometime within the last 5 to 10 years. It wasn't super long time ago.
Okay. And Mia?
So I had never seen this before, and I didn't even know that it was about boxing. I was a little trepidatious going into it if I would like it, just because we've sort of talked about it a little bit in this podcast, and it didn't seem like a movie people were really into. So I kind of went in with like a bit of a chip on my shoulder, I think.
All right. And yeah, I think the only time I saw it all the way through was probably when I was in high school, like really getting into movies and stuff and watching a bunch of Scorsese movies and all the like Hollywood brat guys from the 70s or whatever. And I've probably seen so many clips of the movie because I don't think you can go to film school without seeing clips of this movie as examples of editing and cinematography and acting and just everything. It gets used as an example of some of the highest points of the form, I guess. And I knew that it was a movie that directors really like, as the Sight and Sound poll has shown. But yeah, I think I only saw it all the way through that one time, and have seen large chunks of it otherwise since then in clips and things like that. And of course, there is the somewhat ubiquitous meme of the "you fucked my wife" scene that's been on the internet forever. There's a cut of the Flintstones with Fred and Barney synced up to it that is one of the maybe longer lasting impressions of this film on pop culture at this point. Anyway, so that's where we stood on the film.
Me neither, but now I want to.
I know. Now I want to.
So that is where we stood on the film before watching it for this episode, and we'll get more into the film in just a moment. But first, let's take a break. And we're back. So, as I've often done on the show, I'm going to read from an entry in the Ultimate Encyclopedia of the Movies, which I got when I was in high school and first really getting into movies. As always, the parts that may be more subjective aren't from me personally, but perhaps we can delve into those things as we get into our group discussion. Often cited as the finest film of the 1980s, Raging Bull is a ferocious feat of writing, acting, and directing. A nimble, razor-sharp biopic that fires penetrating blows into the tortured psyche of its subject, post-war middleweight champ Jake LaMotta, Robert De Niro. Shot in gleaming black and white by Martin Scorsese, the picture glides smoothly between LaMotta's time as a lean young scrapper and his later retirement years as a corpulent, washed-up lounge lizard. Despite its factual base and pungent period atmosphere, this is a Greek-style tragedy of epic proportions. A figure of frustrated, inarticulate energies, LaMotta is eventually laid low by the same values that make him a star, battling against his brother Joey, brilliant Joe Pesci, and brutally asserting his shaky machismo against his cold-blooded bride, Cathy Moriarty. Seldom was a Best Actor Oscar more deserved than that awarded to De Niro for providing a gripping interpretation of a character by turns terrifying and pitiable and ballooning 50 pounds to play the later sequences. It's a performance that effortlessly holds the viewer transfixed, though Scorsese punctuates these harsh character x-rays with a series of firecracker, fantastically wrought boxing segments, winning another Oscar for editor Thelma Schumacher, and a dreamlike home movie interlude eased along by a lilting orchestral score. The result is possibly Scorsese's most intense and self-contained picture, an unrelenting, incandescent feast for the senses. As mumbling LaMotta so aptly puts it, arms outstretched, cigar smoldering, that's entertainment. Again, that was from the Ultimate Encyclopedia of the Movies. The path to production for Raging Bull began on the set of The Godfather Part 2 when Robert De Niro read Jake LaMotta's autobiography while on set. He shared it with Martin Scorsese, who wasn't interested in it at first. After pushing it forward with writer Mardik Martin and getting producers Robert Chardoff and Irwin Winkler interested, Scorsese was eventually convinced to come on board as director. At the time, he was recovering from a near-fatal incident stemming from his addiction to cocaine, and has since said that it was only after this quote-unquote rough period that he could understand why De Niro was so interested in LaMotta's story. Paul Schrader, who'd previously written Taxi Driver, of course directed by Scorsese and starring De Niro, was brought in to rewrite Mardik Martin's script, though the final form of it also owed a lot to the uncredited work of Scorsese and De Niro, who holed up for 2.5 weeks in the Caribbean to rework things and ended up crafting some of the iconic moments of the film. Joe Pesci, at the time he was cast, was a struggling actor working at a restaurant in New Jersey. He hadn't been in a film in years, but De Niro happened to see him in a TV movie and thought he'd be great as Joey LaMotta. And Pesci suggested Cathy Moriarty and Frank Vincent for their roles. The film was barely financially successful on its initial release, and while it was not universally adored by critics, many who supported it did so emphatically, often stating that it was, or may have been, the best work to date by Scorsese, De Niro, or both. Raging Bull was nominated for 8 Academy Awards and won 2, Best Actor and Best Film Editing. Its other nominations were for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Supporting Actor, Best Supporting Actress, Best Cinematography, and Best Sound. The big winner at the Oscars that year was Ordinary People, which won Best Picture, Best Director for Robert Redford, Best Supporting Actor for Timothy Hutton, and Best Adapted Screenplay. And interestingly, it was the first of 2 times Scorsese would lose out as Best Director to an actor turned first-time director, the next time being in 1990, when he was nominated for Goodfellas, but Kevin Costner won for Dances with Wolves. To give a sense of what was popular in the United States the year Raging Bull was released, the top 5 films at the North American box office that year were From 1 to 5, The Empire Strikes Back, 9 to 5, Stir Crazy, Airplane, and Any Which Way You Can. The film was listed at number 24 on AFI's 100 Years, 100 Movies list in 1998, then at number 4 on the 2007 list. As for our purposes, Raging Bull has never been in the top 10 of Sight and Sound's critics survey, but was ranked number 3 by directors in 1992 and then number 6 in 2002. In the 2012 polling, it was ranked number 53 by critics and number 12 by directors, and among the filmmakers who had it on their top 10 lists that year were Richard Ayoade, Kenneth Branagh, Francis Ford Coppola, Bong Joon-ho, Michael Mann, and David O. Russell. So, Laura, again, since this was your pick, can you start us off with your thoughts on the film after this viewing and whether it met your expectations or any other thoughts?
Well, I never read the book, so I'm not sure what's, based on that, how much they went away from it. I know that this film is a technical achievement. It's a beautiful film, in like an opera. The editing is incredible, and it's noticeably incredible. It's not like the lighting where you're not supposed to notice it. It's the editing is really something that just the boomerang shot or just all the fight sequences. The acting is incredible as well, but for me, this viewing, I found like I was watching two separate films. It was very hard for me to reconcile the second heavy set, Lounge Lizard, Jake LaMotta versus the original one, the maniacal, bipolar, wife beating asshole, sexually, dysfunctional man. And then, I just, it didn't gel because, people change for sure, but there was no elements of this like funny, there was no lightness to the original Jake. And for it to get that far, it just didn't track for me. So I felt like there were two separate films.
Okay. And Stephen, what do you think?
This felt to me like it was a movie with a capital M. Like it was just definitely one of those movies that where you actually are in film school, you're supposed to really follow as like an example of how you kind of edit or put things together in terms of a movie. I did enjoy it a lot though, and it was very intense for me. So it's it's the acting for me that was just something that I could really hang my hat on. Although, and we might have talked about this during the Godfather movies. It's like I've seen all those characters so much in The Sopranos and in The Godfather that it's kind of hard to take it out and see them as different characters in this movie. But it didn't mean that I didn't appreciate their acting and what they were kind of doing. And with Cathy Moriarty, I haven't seen her in a whole lot of other things, so I thought she was incredibly impressive. I know that she was supposed to play 15, but she definitely didn't look 15, and I think that was the point. So I had to keep reminding myself that's why they did cast her for that. And overall, I just really was taken for a ride and I enjoyed it.
She was 18 when they cast her, and I think 20 when the movie came out. So she
Hmm.
was relatively close to that. I mean, definitely didn't look 15 though. But I just wanted to throw
Yeah,
that out there.
that was hard for
Uh,
me.
Alicia, what do you think?
I want to also echo what Laura said in terms of like it's a beautiful film and noticeably beautiful, and there's so many like filmic elements happening that are really impressive in terms of like him being like behind the ropes and sort of imprisoned by himself and like in the ring you see shots of him alone, punching the camera, and all that is very like impressive. And the performances are just like brilliant, really. I don't know what else to say about the performances besides that, like they're just remarkable. But it yeah, I kind of it for me it fell into that mold of it's another movie about a man who can't get out of his own way, and I don't care.
Mm.
I mean, I enjoyed watching it this time. I will say that. Like, it was more enjoyable for me this time. I watched it the whole way through. I got past whatever was blocking me like the first time. But I think like I just have such a like an intrinsic um distaste for like that type of masculinity in real life that the first time I saw it, I just didn't want to deal like I was just like why would I subject
Mhm.
myself to this for another 2 hours, like in real life I don't in real life I run screaming from things like this. Like I don't do this and I don't do this in life. So it's hard for me to like sit there and subject myself to that, for
It is
entertainment
a bit,
value.
it is like torture a little bit.
Yeah, I feel
Mhm.
like as a viewer, I was like getting punched in the face.
Yeah.
repeatedly.
I could see that.
But I don't want to take anything away from the actual filmmaking and the performing, because those are really, really great achievements. It's just a story that I'm kind of over.
I think that the feeling of being an audience member getting punched in the face is like exactly what they were going for too. Like
Sure.
they wanted
Yeah.
you to feel whatever the hell he's going through, or
Yeah,
his
I think
opponents are going through, I guess. Yeah.
it's a very successful. It does exactly what it sets out to do. It's a very successful movie. It's like I said, it's a great example of
Mhm.
filmmaking. It's just not a story that I'm not interested in.
Right.
But
Fair enough. And Mia.
I said I went into this with a kind of a chip on my shoulder about it, or like, I don't know, just like a vibe that I was like, I don't think I'm going to like this movie. And I actually really liked it. And I thought, I agree with so much of what everyone said. I thought, obviously, technically, like the editing is so good, the directing is so good. I'm curious about the choreography for all the fight scenes, like both like the actual boxing scenes and then just all the other fights that happen. Um, Joe Pesci is so good. Like all the acting is just brilliant. I felt like I was eating like a big steak. Like it's all protein. There's no filler. I totally agree though. The last like 30 minutes of the film, it kind of lost me. Like I was like, "Oh, we're like still watching this movie." Okay. It just felt kind of like tacked on at the end. And I appreciate that they wanted to show like his life and what happened to him and his downfall and all of that. But I guess I just like it's not even like, oh, I wanted him to end on like a high note or something. I just felt like it wasn't really needed for the story. I totally agree, Laura. Like it felt like a separate movie. Um, but yeah, overall, I just thought like, whoa, like this is a fucking movie. Like this is something I get why this is so heralded, why it would be taught, how it could make Scorsese and DeNiro obviously were like already super famous, but like I'm sure this must have like blasted them. Well, I guess you said it wasn't super regarded at first, but in my opinion, I can see how it should have blasted them into like another stratosphere of like fame and respect and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that this movie is the one that cements Scorsese perhaps as like the filmmaker of his generation. And I don't know how much of that was to come, like not in the moment, but I mean, there were people, as I said, that as the movie came out, were like, this is people working at the top of their craft, and I think what you guys are saying, I especially liked what Steven said of calling it like a movie with a capital M. It feels important, but as Laura was saying, like I definitely think it's a hard watch. That's my interpretation of what you were saying. Like I don't enjoy watching so much of it, but like there is, and it takes a while to get to kind of find a way to watch the movie. Like the opening scenes, I'm just like, oh my god, this guy sucks so bad, and he still sucks later in the movie. But it's like it has a lot in common, I think, with a lot of movies that we've watched for this podcast of being about a narcissist just self-destructing in front of us and just getting in their own way, as someone said. And there's just something that is compelling about that to watch on screen when done well. And I think this is like, it's hard. It would be hard to ever say that this movie is not done well, at least in terms of technique and craft. It's like those elements of it are so impeccable. Like it
Right.
looks
It's
amazing.
almost undisputable.
Yeah. There's a reason that it is talked about with the reverence that it's talked about, but it's also like a hard watch. It just is a hard watch. And like, there's a reason I hadn't watched it again since I was like 18 or whatever. And there's a reason I'm probably not going to watch it again for another 10 or 15 years in full. I just don't need to watch it. I understand it and I can appreciate it and like it even for what it is. And I do think that there is something like someone mentioned of, I think Alicia, you said it does what it intends to do. And that's like one thought of like film criticism of like judging a movie for the system that it is as a movie of like, does it achieve what it sets out to do? And like, it must be achieving what it sets out to do. Like, they but I do find it interesting that whereas like a movie like Citizen Kane, which is also about a man kind of slowly self-destructing over the years for us to watch, that movie is in theory about figuring out why he did that. And this movie has no interest in it. That's the thing that I think is kind of unique maybe about this movie and in that list of movies about people narcissists self-destructing, that they just don't care about exploring what made them this way. Like it starts in the middle of it and you just kind of just got to figure out who this guy is on the fly, and there's no rosebud, there's no like going back and talking to all the people who knew him throughout the course of his life. And I do find that interesting and kind of ballsy in a way that they made this movie. They had to know that like that's a potential quote unquote problem with this movie for some viewers, that it neither a likable character and doesn't try to explain why he's unlikable so that you'll understand it any. They just believed and relied on their abilities to hit all the marks in terms of the way it's shot, the way it's edited, the way it's acted, and just let that make it be enough to make it a capital M movie. Alicia.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of how he became what he was at the beginning of the movie, even how he became that monster that he was at that early point in time, I also kept thinking, like, is this supposed to be like a societal thing? Because they're in this very hyper masculine sort of time period, but also like a hyper masculine like environment in like New York City in that time period, and in boxing in that time period. But then you do see examples of other people around him that are like not doing what he's doing and not behaving the way he's behaving. So yeah, I did kind of wonder, like, what was the family dynamic?
Right.
Like, what was also, I thought the relationship with the brother was a little intense at times and a little strange, especially at the end when he was like, give me a kiss, just give me a kiss.
Yeah.
And like, it was just a little bit weird to me. Maybe that's just like from a modern perspective, but yeah, I did also kind of wonder, like, where did this person come from?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Does anyone have any thoughts about why he acts like that towards his brother?
Well, from the book in the end, you mean, or just in
Or
general?
throughout the movie, but that specific moment or the other intense moments,
From
like
what
where
I've
he's
heard is that the dad used to make them fight each other for money in the streets growing up.
Okay.
So the dynamic of the brothers and the intensity of their relationship was strong. But anybody, like with family of men that are similar to that knows what it's like. I think this film is very, hits home for a lot of people
Sure.
just because you see that kind of relationship, just that intensity.
Yeah.
Or I have
Right.
personally.
Mia?
I think too the fact that they have their personal relationship and then they have their business relationship too, which are so intertwined. And
Right.
I presume, the movie just starts, right? But he's already a really good established boxer at that point. So I assume his brother has been managing him for, 10 years at that point. I don't know. To some degree of formality or not. But I think anytime you have your family helping you with like business decisions and financial decisions, and they're obviously very intertwined in each other's lives, I think just stuff can be more intense than if you're just brothers and you just have your personal relationship, if there's this business side of it as well, or if you're just business colleagues, right? Like you can always walk away. And I think there's scenes where they're questioning each other, why are you doing this or why aren't you doing that thing? So obviously there's contention at times with the business side of things too.
I think there's like another level. I think there's like some hints at some other underlying feelings in there, because there's like a lot of worry about coming off as homosexual in the beginning of the film, and his first wife is like, oh, you're gonna go suck each other's dicks, and there's the guys at the boxing ring that are like, oh, they're, I don't want to say the word, but they're, F words when they're fighting each other. And he's just like, he just brings the brother into like every relationship. Like he brings the brother into like the marriage with Vicky. Like he meets her, he gets introduced to her through him. He's like so obsessed with like her having slept with him and asking him to like keep an eye on her. And I don't know, I just think there's like some other elements at
Let me ask you a
play
question,
in
Alicia.
there.
Do you think that translates in the second half of the film, or does it just stop?
Well, I think once the brother cuts off contact with him, it's hard to know because he's not in the movie for much of the second half of the film. After that, attack happens, it's only when he sees him and then he
Right.
approaches him, and he doesn't come to him to say sorry, really. He just kind of is like, let's forget about it. You're my brother. Give me a kiss. Like all this stuff. It's very, I mean, all his relationships are obviously like one-sided, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, because he's not in the second half of the film, it's hard to know how much. I mean, we do get a lot of his inner life, but his inner life seems to just be all revolved around himself, sort of, and not how other people are, not how he's making other people feel, if that makes sense.
I kind of had a question for Laura and for Mia when you said that it was two different movies. Do you feel like you needed more of Jake, like his growing up, or you needed more of, that part of him that was sort of on the downward spiral to make the movie more coherent? Or do you feel like that should have been left out completely and it just being like a linear movie?
Well, for me, I don't know how much of it is taken from the book and the life of Jake LaMotta, but he was such a dark, controlling, jealous, scary, antisocial, sexually dysfunctional man for the first hour, maybe hour and 10 minutes. And then he's everyone's friend, he's Buddy Hackett. He'll make out with girls at the bar. Meanwhile, he really doesn't want to fuck his wife, like well, that happens in a lot of marriages like that. But from what she had originally said, like, when she went out with Salvi, she was sexually frustrated, and it just seemed like it was just a different person to me.
Yeah, I felt similarly too. When he said he bought a club and then he was the one up there making jokes, I was like, oh, wait, what? Especially because there had been the scene earlier and they're at the Copacabana and there's the guy on stage making jokes and everything. And I was like, wait, that's what he's doing now? Is he funny? Like, what? It just totally
like
threw
there's
me.
no
Where did
seeds
it
of
come
that
from?
in the
Yeah.
early part
Yeah.
of the film. Not even
And-
an inkling.
No,
Yeah.
not an inkling at all. And it just seemed really, and I get that they wanted to show, like, and I mean, it's true, like, that's what he did, right? So if they were trying to show the story a little further beyond his boxing career ending, they needed to do that. I guess for me, I guess I would have been fine if they were just like, here's like a 5 or 10 minute, just like tack on of like, here's what happened, and not really make it a part of the movie, just more like, here's how things ended, kind of. Or I think if it had been more balanced or something. One thing I wish that I looked it up later, he was married 7 times. So I would have loved if they'd had some more like scenes of that. Yeah, 7. Which I was like, holy shit, that means there were 5 wives after the 2 that are 80% of the movie, like that's nuts. So I guess to me, it just felt kind of unbalanced where there was so much attention on these 20 years of his boxing career. And then they're like, kind of like, oh, and then this other shit happened to him. But like, it felt very fast to me, as opposed to being more like either cut it or really go into it and just make it a much longer movie.
Well, I have 2 things on this. I think that I agree that it does seem to come out of nowhere, but I do think it makes a certain amount of sense because, like, he's not someone who knows how to function on a person-to-person level, and he can't box anymore. So it's like somehow he ended up doing this and he sucks at it. He's not good on stage. He's terrible at telling jokes. Like his line deliveries when he's just like practicing are just like abominable, and not much better on stage when he's actually live. Like he's not good at it. But it's like he needs to. The only way he can like function in the world in a way that isn't completely dysfunctional is to be like doing something in front of people where he's like at the center, and so that's what the avenue he has to himself once he's let himself go and can't box anymore. I think that it makes sense in that regard. The other thing is, the story goes that one of the things that De Niro and Scorsese did with the script was they rearranged it because Schrader's version of the script, Paul Schrader's version, had the stand-up act peppered throughout the film instead of bookending it. And they decided they didn't want that. Or no, actually, I'm sorry. I think they did shoot it that way. And I think it was in the edit that they undid that. Scorsese and Schumacher decided like that wasn't working. And it was better to just have it be more linear, except for the flashback from the very beginning when they show him large and bad at the beginning, and then start the flashback to his career as a boxer. But I don't know. Does anybody think that would have worked better to see more of it throughout the film? So it didn't.
No.
Yeah. I don't either. I think it would have just seemed like intrusive.
I mean, if he was going to be funny, you're not funny out of nowhere. Like, I get
he's not funny,
fell
though.
flat. Well, that's the thing, but he's still.
He thinks he is.
He didn't even. Yeah. He didn't demand an audience. He didn't. He was just agitated and angry all the time.
Right.
It just was hard for me. I made my point. I'll stop making it.
No. I'm interested in it. I don't disagree with you that it seems out of nowhere. Like I said, I just think that he has to be at the center of attention because he doesn't know how to function otherwise, and he can't be in a one-on-one relationship with anyone.
In my life, but they can still be dynamic and interesting and tell good stories.
Right. Sure.
But then they twist on a dime and it's something else. But you don't get that in the beginning. He's just a blockhead who takes a good punch and is brutal.
Right. But I would say that that's why it makes sense that he's so bad at being on stage as a comedian. Like, he's not built to be a comedian. There's nothing in the early parts of the film that shows that would seem to lead him on that path. It's like just a split-second decision he probably made at some point that, like, I'm going to buy a club and I'm going to start doing stand-up because that seems like something I should do. And probably if anybody was around him to tell him anything that he would listen to, they'd be like, what the fuck are you doing? This makes no sense. You're not funny. You can barely string a sentence together in front of people.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the brutality versus what happens at the end. Yeah, he's pathetic, but it's different.
He's trading on his name. That's what he's doing. That's all he can do. And he's diminished. Like, he's obviously like not a together person, and they want to show you how pathetic he is at this point in his life. I think the second half worked for me. I do agree that they didn't like lay the foundations for him wanting to be in comedy or whatever. Like, that did kind of come out of nowhere. But a lot of athletes and people do try to make that turn at a certain point in their career because you can only be an athlete for so long. Your body's only going to do that for so long. So you do try to do other things. But I did think that also you get that scene of him in prison in the second half of the movie, or in jail rather, where he's in solitary and he just goes nuts in there. And I think that also ties a lot of stuff together. And for me, that actually that whole second half of the movie worked fine for me, really.
That's why I asked the question, because it worked completely fine for me, and I didn't really think that it was unbalanced. I just felt like what you said, Alicia, about like people just kind of do what they know how to do, or what people tell them what to do if they've done one thing their whole lives. And he was just trying to do something, and everything he tried to do after that just didn't work for him, and it sort of culminated to the end with him being upset with himself.
Alicia, I'm curious what you meant by that scene tied it all together for you. Like, what in that scene sort of crystallized something for you, if that's what you meant?
Just that he's a raging bull. Like, he's just he has these issues. They never went away. He's pretending, he's playing, he's acting that he's this like happy-go-lucky Mr. Entertainer club owner, when he's not, when his life is falling apart. Really, still, his wife leaves him at this point in the movie. You know, he doesn't have he even says he goes over to the house for something to get his belt,
the belt, yeah,
to pawn it, and he doesn't even do that right. And she's like, why don't you get your friends to help you? And he's like, what friends? And it's like, yeah, he doesn't have friends. He has like people that come to his club and that he tries to like be jovial with, but there's no deep connections there.
So. I feel like that scene is linked in some way to maybe the only other time in the movie where he shows like a genuine emotion other than just pure rage. Because like I would argue that scene in the cell is like him breaking down emotionally. Like he's sad and pathetic and realizes it's not just anger that's coming out. It's coming out as anger, but it's other emotions mixed in there. But after he throws a fight and he breaks down in the I don't know what you call it, not backstage, it's not a stage, but after the event, and he realizes like he's screwed up his entire like goal. His goal was to get to the championship on his own terms and never have to like throw a fight and do it anybody else's way. And he has undermined that. He's lost his sense of purity about his goal and his what he thought he could do. And that's the only other time in the movie where he seems like sympathetic in any way, shape, or form, I think. But I don't know, like that. I think that's the other theme of the movie, or maybe the theme of the movie, of this sense of a purity that he has about him. And then he undermines it. And is that what sets him on the path towards his corpulent lounge lizard self, as the encyclopedia of the movies calls him?
I had some questions about the logistics of some of the fights. I don't know if we want to go into all that, but like, I couldn't understand the first fight. I think it was the first fight in the movie. He basically knocks the guy out, right? But then he loses the fight. Like, I didn't understand
because it's not just about
it's
points. And they went the full 10 rounds.
They did points and points.
Yeah. You can still get
I think it was
knocked
also
down.
timing. Like there's only so much time that you can fight, I think. And so then at the very last round, the guy's down for like 7 seconds or something. And I think you have to be down for 10. But
Saved by the bell.
Yeah, the timing for the fight overall ended like a second before he would be done. And he had done better earlier in the fight and had points. So even though it ended with a knockout, he was saved by the bell. I was literally just figuring this out. I don't know shit about boxing. So
I think it was that. And also like, didn't they imply hometown advantage because he was like in Cleveland and it was the Ohio Boxing Commission rules and stuff. And so
they just decided he shouldn't win. And I was like, how is that? Like,
well, I think it
there's a reason he was outraged by it and his supporters were outraged by it. But
I have a feeling that the points are kind of subjective-y a little bit, maybe too, of like who, if there's not a because I don't think there's a knockout like every single round, right? It's just like you
in boxing in general there isn't.
So I think it's more like who wins each round, probably based on like, I don't know, number of punches or types of punches, something. Right. No, I know. But but is it like, could you be like, okay, like kind of in gymnastics, right? Like they get a score for each thing, but like it's a little subjective. I don't know.
Well, of course, it's like with the other fight with Ray, that they gave it to him, and I think they tried to show the film that LaMotta won, but because he was going into the army by decision.
Yeah.
Right.
So yes, to your point, Mia.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I also was like a little confused about the fight that he threw because I was like, it didn't seem like he was trying to make it look real at all. Maybe that was just like
I mean that was part of the problem. Is it like he couldn't
right?
He
couldn't throw a fight correctly.
He couldn't put himself into throwing a fight because it was against his purity, as I was.
And then he got in trouble because he made it too obvious that he threw the fight. Right. And so then he got banned for a few years or 2 years. Yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
that just went back to his intelligence. He couldn't even throw a fight correctly.
I don't know if
think
it was
the guy was
intelligence
just
though.
such a bad fighter that he was so shocked by
Yeah,
it.
there was that too.
Yeah.
But I thought it was just that like he could like there was a pride about it that like he was trying to throw the fight and trying to give the guy the opportunity to make it look real. But he was like, I can only do so much with this fucking idiot, this
Right.
like this bum as he called him, you know.
Exactly.
And at some point he's just like, whatever. I'm not gonna just fall down when this idiot touches me like I should, which is what his brother points out after the match, right?
Yeah. I thought too, because the whole
Mhm.
thing with throwing it is all tied up in like the neighborhood crime gang
Yeah.
guys, you know, who he has like tried to avoid and try not
Right.
to have anything to do with personally or professionally. But now to get where he needs to go, he needs to make them happy. So that to me was part of it too, where he's just like, no, like I'm not going to play your game. I can't do it.
Right.
Even though he ends up screwing himself, at least for some time because of that. But that was also something that I was curious about. I was okay that they didn't like set up his life before, that we just start and you have to figure everything out. But I was really struck by the differences between him and his brother. You know, like his brother's like, chill with these guys. We'll go hang out with them. We'll go talk to them. And then he's just like, no, I don't want anything to do with it.
Mhm.
I mean, I think that happens in a lot of families with, stuff like that. Everyone makes up their own mind about certain things. And one of them was okay with the organized crime situation, and one of them had, personal feelings against it.
Yeah. I was just curious, like, why, you know? I mean, I guess it just ties into, like, why are they each the way they are?
Right.
Mm.
Well, I got the sense that Jake is basically the only thing he believes in the world is himself. You know, that's the only thing. And so that's why he doesn't want to rely on the local crime boss to help him make his way through the ranks of boxing. But his brother is a little more pragmatic and understands
How the
the
world
realities of the world and knows that like, hey, just because, or at least I'm not saying he knows it like it's a reality, but like in his mind, just because you got some help to get there doesn't mean you didn't do the work to win the match. Once you are there. So he just saw it as like a more pragmatic way. I do want to say though, just real quick, like one thing that stuck out to me on this viewing is Joe Pesci. One of the biggest cliches in movies of talking about like DeNiro gaining 50 pounds for this movie, and he like ate his way across France and Italy for like 4 months as they shut down the picture, but Joe Pesci is so good in this movie. He's like the secret weapon of this movie, I think, because he's just like, you can understand every decision he's making and everything he's saying to his brother. You can see him weighing like, what is going to set this idiot off that I'm related to and have to deal with and work with and love and hate at the same time. And he's just so good. And it's insane that he wasn't really like in anything notable before this, and this is like sort of launches his career. Like he's so good. Laura.
I want to say that I thought Cathy Moriarty was so good. And
Yes.
this is one of the few times I've fully been offended by something that one of the what you read from in the beginning of these.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
me
Probably-
too.
When they call her cold-blooded.
Yeah.
Mhm,
Yeah, I didn't
mhm.
get that either.
I was
say.
like, fuck
Yeah.
you.
I
She's
know.
Yeah.
15. She's surviving.
Yeah.
She's getting
Yeah.
the shit kicked out of her. Like,
Yeah.
we'd only see her getting really brutalized, a couple times. But
Right.
it's obvious, So fuck whoever wrote that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Seriously.
Yeah,
I
I
had
don't.
the same
I
thought.
agree with you. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with you.
She's so good. Like,
She's
the acting
great.
is so good. I love her accent. Like
She's beautiful, too.
She's so beautiful. She's so well dressed. She's so cool.
If you love her,
yeah.
you should watch this movie called Soap Dish. She made
Okay.
it a lot later in
Oh
her
yeah,
life.
that's
Okay.
great. That's a great movie. I love
And
it.
But
also
she's
Casper.
incredible in it.
Awesome. Also, what, Jeremiah?
Casper.
Wait, Casper?
Casper.
Yeah.
Not the
Yes.
90s one. Like the
Yes.
Really? Who is she?
Yes, she's in Casper. I don't know. I haven't seen it since it came out, and I barely saw it then.
Oh, I loved that movie when I was
She's memorable enough to remember Casper.
Yeah, I looked at her filmography as I was prepping for this episode, and it's kind of interesting. She was in this movie and then like another movie or two right away, and then like a 5-year break until she was in something in '87. I forget what, and then it was like she was in stuff through the '90s and has been like kind of less in things since then too. But I don't know, interesting career just looking over her filmography.
She was in the recent American Crime Story about Versace.
There you go. Well, Laura, you had a question for the group if you want to go to that.
If this film was shot in color, would it be as impactful?
No, I really like the black and white, especially with the boxing scenes. I thought it was just made things so stark and incredible. I mean, I did really like the little home movie color flashes and stuff like that, but the black and white, I think it just elevates the film too, right? Like when with Steven's movie with a capital M, it's like it helps with that for sure.
Like I said, I haven't read the biography, but I know that I think one of the first lines of it is something like, "When I think about my life, I think of my memories in black and white." But I know that didn't weigh in. That wasn't the reason why Scorsese shot it black and white. So I just thought it was all just something to think about.
Well, it's also interesting then that the reality of the movie is black and white, and then the home movies, which you would normally think of as memories, are in color. With that in mind, so he shot it in black and white because of like wardrobe stuff, essentially, right? Like something to do with like the color of things. I don't know, something with that, and something with film stock that he wasn't happy with at the time.
I think they developed
which I
the
didn't quite
film on
understand.
Technicolor stock or something, but the budget. I don't know.
Was it that the stock that they could afford to get in color just wasn't something he was going to be happy with?
You know,
Is that what it was?
I would misspeak. I'm not
Yeah.
exactly sure.
Yeah, people go look it up if you're interested.
Yeah.
But it was like technical reasons that he didn't shoot. Like it's not. I don't think it was. I think I'd heard, and I couldn't find anything then to support this when I was looking it up before, that it was similar to Psycho, where he wanted to shoot in black and white because he thought that it would make all the blood more palatable.
That's interesting.
But I couldn't find anything to support that. I think that's just like an apocryphal thing I heard from somebody sometime. But anyway.
Yeah. I think I remember that from what movie was that? One of the Kill Bill movies. I think that's how they got around. Making it in our movie,
right?
By making it black.
The first one, I think.
Yeah,
because it goes into black and white when like the Crazy 88 gang or who I think comes in. And
yeah, exactly.
Goes at her. But I do also think that it would not be as impactful in color. I think it was a smart decision to be in black and white for whatever reason it was. There's something about it that does make it seem important. Like and it's almost like cliche, but it works. You know, like that. After a certain point, when black and white had fallen out of favor, that when a movie is in black and white, it usually denotes some level of artistic importance. But there's a reason for it sometimes. It just fits this story. It fits like the time of the story, and the fights look so amazing. Even in black and white.
I like what your point is in terms of it's saying something that it sees itself important. From the opening credits, it sort of does that.
Yeah, totally. It's like almost operatic with the music going and the slow-mo and all that. Yeah, totally. Steven, what do you think about black and white versus color?
Oh, I'm on the same page as everybody else. I do like the black and white scenes, and I felt like it was more impactful having like the warmth of like his just regular life of jumping in the pool and the wedding scenes and everything. It did feel a little bit more like documentary style, like someone's life when you saw something like that. But I feel like it kind of goes into the balance of the movie, like what was his home life and what was like his fighting life, and the black and white felt like his fighting life to me.
Yeah, it puts you in that era, and that was like an era when things were a little more glamorous, like especially like in 1980, the world was very, or at least my my view when I look back on that time period when I was only 2 years old. The world seems very like gritty and kind of gross and a little like over the top in terms of colors and like a little garish and stuff. And when you it would to make a movie in that time period and set it in the 40s and 50s, I think it's really smart to do it in black and white just because it's such a contrast to, the world around around you at that time. And yeah, there's just a glamour to black and white, and there's a glamour to that time period. I wanted to know what everybody thought about the quote at the end on screen, "I was blind and now I see," because I felt like he never saw. Like, I felt like he never got out of himself. He never, like, I mean, I think he recognized that he had, like, problems, but I don't think he ever did anything about it. So I thought it was a very strange quote.
I read an article, that's an interview, and Scorsese said that he tacked that line on to the script, so that when people read it, they would see that it had like a biblical weight to it. Not necessarily intending it to be in the film. But obviously Scorsese himself's a failed priest. He'd just gotten out of like rehab where, from what I read, he was quote unquote bleeding from every orifice from like whatever had happened to him, whatever mix of drugs he was doing. So I think he added that and used it for himself to show what the film meant to him.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot more sense as a director's statement than like a statement of what the film is trying to say necessarily,
Which doesn't,
so that does make a certain amount of sense.
Unless without context, you don't know those things, but
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. It's a choice, but
because
I
was confused by it too, and because it was the quote, and then it was like something at the end, like his signature.
That's just like he said something to a teacher that passed away. That was
okay, yeah. I was just confused by. I guess so. Yeah, that made me think it was just more separate from the film, not really associated.
It wasn't associated with the film. Yeah,
it wasn't.
Yeah. Okay. Also, the way he signed it, Marty, which I know, like his friends call him. You know what I mean? But like, obviously, that's not like what he's known as like a director. So that also made me think this is just separate. But yeah, I was also reading it and like trying to tie it back at first, and I was like, "What the hell?" Like,
yeah, I mean, I agree that it doesn't make sense like within just the context of the movie if you don't know anything about Martin Scorsese and his history and all that. But like, yeah, I think when you know the history around the production and him at the time, where he's like, "This might be my last movie because I could die," so it makes a certain amount of sense. Then it's like, this is me signing off just in case.
I think it was also right after New York, right? Which was a big flop.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I think this was his next
kind
movie,
of, it could have been a swan song.
Right.
His last chance to make a movie.
Yeah. And that movie has actually gained more acclaim in recent years. So if anybody's interested in checking it out.
I am interested. I have never seen it. That is definitely.
I saw it in college and wasn't thrilled with it, but I might like it more these days. I don't know.
I almost walked into Martin Scorsese on the street one time.
Oh,
in New York.
Did he say anything to you?
No, but he turned around and looked at me because
I'm walking here.
It was me that was walking here. Like, he was walking in front of me with his wife, I guess, and they were like, they're a little bit older. This was like almost probably like 20 years ago. It was like right when I first moved to New York, and they were walking kind of slow, and it was like Times Square area, and I was trying to get wherever I was going like really fast, and you're annoyed by everybody when you're walking around over there, and I'm like stuck behind them because there's people on either side, and I was like, like,
Alicia.
Like, I was just so annoyed in that moment, like, and because Times Square, and I didn't think it would be anybody, and then I kind of got to the point where I was about to like be able to get around them, and he kind of turned around and looked at me, and I was like, Martin Scorsese.
Guess you're not in his
Like,
next picture.
I felt really bad. I mean, I should have felt bad no matter who it was, but I was really just like, oh my God, Alicia.
You should have.
You're
It's
in
a
New
good
York.
story.
You never know who you're going to be around.
true.
It's true. You never
don't
know who's
do
going to be in your
that.
fucking way.
Yeah.
You know, that's what
Nice.
that's the story.
So those are our thoughts on Raging Bull. We will share our final thoughts on the movie and answer our bonus question after this break. And we're back. So what was your favorite scene or moment or element of the movie? Laura, can you start us off?
I have to say the fight scenes were incredible, but there was this one shot that I'd never seen anything like it, and it was like a boomerang shot where it goes with his punch out there, and then it literally comes back and it punches him. It was just an incredible shot. I've never seen anything like it. That stood out to me, so that I looked that up. But a lot of the fight sequences and, you know, that to me was art.
There you go. Mia.
My favorite was also the fight sequences. Specifically, I'm pretty sure it's the last fight when he gets the shit just like totally beat out of him. And there's just like a ton of blood and it's really intense. But the lighting in that scene is just like such dramatic, like black and white, and was just really intense. And I can only imagine what seeing that in a movie theater would have been like.
And Steven.
My favorite was, I think it was when he was in jail at the very end and he just started falling apart and he was punching the wall and screaming why, and then like hitting his face, and it was just very intense, and I actually felt sorry for him, and I didn't the entire movie until that happened. And so just to evoke that in me, I was just like, I can't believe I'm actually feeling sorry for, like, everything just culminated in that scene of like all the mistakes that he had made, and it just made me kind of empathize with him, which was a surprise. But so yeah, that was my favorite.
And back to you, Alicia.
Yeah, I agree with Steven. I think that was for me the most effective scene in terms of like feeling his rage and feeling his turmoil. I mean, you see it before, but you don't really, that's the moment that's really visceral. And like you can see that even when he's alone. Even when he's alone, he's just like a tortured person. It's not just in the ring. It's not just when his wife makes him mad or his brother makes him mad. It's like he's just a tortured soul.
I think previously I would have said the cinematography and throughout the movie and the editing, especially during the fight scenes. But since that's been well covered, I'm going to say Joe Pesci. Joe Pesci is my favorite part of the movie this time. So has the movie, as far as you're concerned, stood the test of time? Or another way of framing it, do you think it resonates today? And Mia, why don't we start with you?
Yes, definitely. Stands the test of time. Still resonant. I agree with what Alicia was saying earlier, though. I mean, I hate him. Like, he sucks, right? And I think I also don't have a ton of patience for, like, wow, this poor guy kind of movies. And I think there's a thread to discuss of, we've talked about a lot of these because there's a lot of ones on this list of, what are considered classic movies and who are making the decisions and all of that kind of stuff, which we've talked about before. So, I think that would be my only like ding against it. Like, I think the movie is so well done, so well directed, so well acted, all of those things that like it is this absolute classic capital M movie. Um, but as always, like I would have loved to see like more of Vicky's story in this and more about her. It's not a movie about her, so I get it, but like make another movie that's just about her just so I can see her more.
And Alicia?
Yeah, similar. Like I do think, like I said, it's an achievement in filmmaking, and it's an achievement for like all the actors and for the direction and the editing and everything. But I just wish that there was like I wish we could, as a society, I wish we could find a better way to tell stories like this, because I do think it's a very like worthwhile thing to examine. this type of personality and this type of like masculinity and this type of like fragility, but it does it has its message, but then it's the way it's sort of revered in pop culture, the way the movie is revered in pop culture, and the black and white and the love for it and everything, like, to me, like, slightly glamorizes and slightly undercuts the fact that it's a dark story about a very, like, messed up person that no one should want to emulate in any way.
Sort of like
So that's
Scarface.
yeah, sure. Like, I mean, like a lot of movies from the last 100
Little
years.
gangster shit, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, not I
The
mean, just like a
Godfather,
lot of things.
Goodfellas.
The
I mean,
Godfather,
any
sure.
of those.
Donnie Brasco.
Mad Men. I mean, it doesn't have to
Yeah.
be in that world, you know. It's
Oh, for sure.
you know,
We're rewatching
there's
Succession right now. I mean, same thing.
yeah, and even like the new version of Game of Thrones, I think is really an interesting watch because it's very much about like how patriarchy is affecting the society and the women. It's much more women focused. There's much more of a female gaze. There's still some questionable things here and there, but like the first version of Game of Thrones was very much a male gaze type of show in a lot of ways. And this one they're doing it a little bit differently, so I really appreciate that. Anyway, sorry to go off on that
Steven,
tangent.
how
But I'm
about
just
you?
saying, like, it's
No, I
nice
think
to know
that's
that
a good
I thought it was
point.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
there's other ways that we can tell these stories, you know, and so I
Yeah.
look forward to
Yeah.
more of that in the future.
Steven, do you think it resonates?
Oh, of course it does. And, just the transformation that Robert De Niro went through, and, he became a different person in this movie. And also the fight scenes were just, they felt real. And that's just a testament to how it was directed and put together. But I don't think there's anything that I can say that everybody else hasn't kind of said about it. So very good.
Laura?
I think it's an achievement. There's nothing like it. But does it resonate? No. I think it's about a dying kind of man, a certain kind of masculinity that doesn't resonate anymore. And listen, I grew up with this. I know, like, it was everywhere. It was socially acceptable, like that was how everyone was. But it's changing. The world's changing. I know it's still out there, but nobody really wants to hear this story anymore from their side. We don't want to pity these men, because of all their self-loathing, because I don't know. I don't think it resonates the same way. I think it's an old story that's we're all kind of tired of seeing, or I am.
I think it stands the test of time because it is an achievement of craft and technique and all that. I would also say that it resonates today because as long as there are self-destructing narcissists, this type of story will make a certain amount of sense to people. I'm kind of like, I don't think this movie pities him at all. I think he's so unsympathetic in it. So I don't really understand saying that, like Mia, you said that it's like, why this guy or something. I don't think this movie has a good attitude about this guy. I think this movie hates this guy to some extent. Like it doesn't show him in a good light. So I do think that it has a different from like Citizen Kane. I'm trying to look at the list. The Godfather. These movies that show men in a self-destructive mode. And like I said, I don't think this movie really cares about why he's this way. It's just showing you the act of him self-destructing. And so I do think it's different in that way. That said, I totally agree that there's plenty of movies about white men in the world going through all this shit, and we could use more movies about narcissistic, self-destructing women and people of other
that smack up
backgrounds.
their men.
HBO is on it. Don't worry.
Sure. So, yeah. Anyway, now it's time for our bonus question. As we're recording, the World Cup is starting up. So, what is your favorite sports movie? Alicia, since this was your question, do you want to answer first? And also, I should point out, it's also appropriate because of the movie we're talking about in this episode.
Oh, yeah. Jeez, I didn't even realize that. I didn't make that connection.
Oh, that it was
Is this a
sports?
sports movie?
Yeah.
I
That
guess
would
I don't
be a
even
good
think. I
question.
think of boxing is just like a fighting. I don't even think of it as like sport, but I guess it is
It's a sport.
definitely.
It's in the Olympics.
Yeah, that's true. I guess my favorite sports ball movie is probably The Natural with Robert Redford. I just remember I haven't seen it in a really long time, but my memory of it is just like he's so beautiful and like the movie is like beautiful and he hits the ball and the light the he hits the ball into the lights or something and the lights in the stadium all start sparkling all over the field and it just is like oh, it's just beautiful, beautiful. Like I don't care anything about like the actual sports. To quote a Canadian / British comedian that I enjoy, I don't care where the ball goes. So for me, if a movie about sports and playing ball can like emotionally move me, that one did. So that's my favorite.
There you go. Steven, how about you?
I do enjoy a bunch of sports movies, but the one that came to mind was Moneyball, which came out in 2011 with Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill. And it was just a different take on like how teams are put together and how to use analytics to kind of figure out your teams. And it was told. I read the book, which was kind of dull, but watching the movie, it was presented in such a great way that I really remembered seeing it and really enjoyed it more than I expected.
Mia?
My favorite sports movie is Remember the Titans, starring Denzel. I just love it. I cry every time.
Wait, Denzel who?
Denzel Washington. I'm sorry. Are there two Denzels in
No,
Hollywood?
I'm just kidding. I'm just joking.
He looks great. The sports ball looks great. It's like racial integration and football in the South. Oh, and also it has baby Hayden Panettiere in it. Who sucks. I hate child actors, but whatever. But yeah, it's just really good. Like the soundtrack is really good. You cry. It's very touching. In second place, though, I will say the new A League of Their Own television show is so good. I also love A League of Their Own movie. It's great, but Alicia's making a face, so maybe not. But I really love
Oh
the television
no,
show.
I was
Oh,
agreeing
okay.
with you and regretting that I
Okay.
forgot about A League of Their Own, the movie, when I thought of
Yeah.
my favorite one.
Yeah, A League of Their Own is so good. But yeah, I was really kind of like with the TV show. I was like, we'll see. They're just gonna remake it, but like I feel like they really updated it and added new characters and dimensions, and it was so good. And I feel like a lot of people didn't watch it, or I didn't really hear people talking about it. So every opportunity, I want to promote it because it was so good. It is so good.
All right. And Laura?
I like sports movies a lot. I'm a sucker for them. It was between two, and The Hustler is an important film for me, but I had to go with Rocky. I just had to.
All right. There you go. And for me, it was also between two. Moneyball, which I think is a great recent sports movie. My other choice, since Steven already went with Moneyball, I'll go with this one, is Field of Dreams. I love that movie. It's so cheesy, but so damn good. It's just like there's no reason that movie should work. It's
It's true,
ludicrous.
but it does.
Yeah, it works, and it works so well. Like it makes no sense. It's just like one of those magic movies, you know. And while we're at it, let's see what people in our Facebook group said when we asked the question there of what their favorite sports movie was. Steven said he was torn between A League of Their Own and Major League, both good picks. Charlie said 8 Men Out, one of John Sayles' best, which I do agree with. That's a great movie. But he also said honorable mention to an underappreciated classic, Searching for Bobby Fischer, also a good movie. And yeah, I don't hear people talk about that one a lot anymore. I feel like it was omnipresent for a little while when it came out and in the years following. Rebecca said heroes get remembered, but legends never die. The Sandlot is her answer. Man, a lot of baseball movies. There's so many baseball movies. JPK, who has been a guest on this show in the past, suggested Bull Durham. Phyllis, my mother, in fact, is a big fan of Remember the Titans and Cinderella Man. And George went with Hoosiers, but also says that he has a place in his heart still for Bad News Bears. So those are some of the answers from people in our Facebook group. And please do look out for when we ask questions like this in the group if you want to be included in the show. So our next episode is Alicia's fifth pick. Do you want to tell us about that?
It's Apocalypse Now, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, released in 1979 and available to rent on Apple, Amazon, Google, and I'm sure other places too. And we should probably tell people which version we're doing.
Yeah, and this could be part of the podcast. Steven answered me before. I emailed everyone saying, like, I think we should watch Redux because the only time this movie appeared in the top 10 was on the director's list in 2012, and the most recent thing that had been out was Redux, and I have a feeling like maybe that coming out and people watching that might have led to it making it onto the list. So I thought that might make sense. Does anybody disagree with that or have other takes on like whether we should watch original cut or final cut that came out in 2019?
I mean, I think your argument kind of really holds up. So it's hard to disagree with that. I was aiming for the original, but I think you make a good point, Jeremiah.
Okay.
And we just
Well,
go
I
through
mean,
it.
and I think if we watch Redux, that one is mainly stuff was added in. So we could easily kind of talk about what the movie is with and without that as part of our conversation too. And just throwing it out there, we'll see what happens with the sight and sound list that might be out as people are listening to this. Maybe we can end up watching Final Cut later. But yeah, that's a whole commitment. So it sounds like we're going with Redux.
All right, Redux.
Redux it is?
Redux.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
All right. So that's it for this episode of Stereoactive Movie Club. We invite you to join us in our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Stereoactive Movie Club. You can also email us at stereoactivemovieclub@gmail.com. And you can subscribe to this show just about anywhere you listen to podcasts. If you have a moment, please rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, or anywhere else that allows you to do that. It helps others to find the show, and we really appreciate it. Also, you can get updates about the show by following Stereoactive Media on Instagram or Twitter. Thanks for listening.
Stereoactive Movie Club.
This podcast is produced by Stereoactive Media.